You're listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
And we are live from America in a free speech zone. The show that brings you the truth behind the headlines. And there's a lot of truth and too many headlines. I'm Lee Stranahan. This is The Backstory. So I could not be more thrilled. Once again, our intrepid producer, Rod, has put together a fantastic show for you today. First off, someone I'm proud and honored to call a friend, Igor Lopotnik. He's the director of the film Ukraine on Fire and Revealing Ukraine that I'm in. And Igor is somebody, that film, Ukraine on Fire. Have you noticed, Rod, that a lot of people are discovering those films? Did you see Aaron Mate recommended them about a day ago?
Yeah, it's being rediscovered, even though, you had brought Igor on, got on Sputnik and started promoting it, but it's still good that people are being able to watch it and learn what's going on.
Well, because here's the thing. I was on Alex Jones today. I did the Alex Jones show. And Alex said, and I love going on with Alex. Alex said, and by the way, I plead guilty to this. Alex said, Lee could be irritating on the Ukraine-Russia thing. And I know what he means. Because I have been obsessed at getting ahead of this Ukraine-Russia story for years now. And it gets, imagine how I feel. If you think other people are irritated, Rod, imagine what it's like to be inside. As Bob Dylan once said, I've got a head full of ideas that are driving me insane. And because I really have been obsessed in this Ukraine stuff. The film Ukraine on Fire was my introduction to actually figuring out what the hell's going on in Ukraine 4 years ago. And then for me to be able to be in the sequel, Revealing Ukraine, was just completely honored. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, this is history in the making right now. Not that it's good what's going on as far as this war, but it's good that we've been ahead of it many years.
And I'm going to actually argue what's going on now is good in a way. It really is. I said this to Alex earlier, so I'll make the same point here. Then the second hour, my former co-host. So it's people I'm always like talking to and I'm honored to talk to. CIA whistleblower, the heroic John Kiriakou will be joining us. And I'm sure, do you think the subject of the bioweapons is going to come up at all with John? Is that your guess, Rod?
Possibly. And right before the show started, the State Department had a press conference, so we might have some clips to go along with it.
Oh, that'd be great. Let me know if we got those, because this story, and let me just do the boom. In fact, Rod, let me have you do the honors. Say the name of the show and watch what happens.
You're listening to The Backstory.
Well done, sir. Well done. A suitable amount of gravitas. So let me make a broad point, which is this Ukraine-Russia situation is Grand Central Station. It's the place where all of the stories meet. Let me explain. And I really want everyone to think about this. obviously, in the past 2 years, the big story has been COVID-19, right? Now, how does this relate to that? Well, one very direct way, these bioweapons labs raise a lot of questions about what the hell the United States of America has been doing in terms of bioweapons, including things that could cause pandemics, right? Don't you think that Victoria Nuland's admission that the U.S., there's bioweapons labs in Ukraine, and the U.S. is clearly behind them, don't you think that raises a lot of questions about the pandemic potentially, Rod?
I'm starting to see a few, not many because of what's going on. The media's focused on Ukraine, but I'm starting to see people kind of trace it backwards to what started in March 2020. And, like, you know, Dr. Fauci, like a lot of people are noticing, he's not on TV every day anymore. I think he should be called up to answer questions about these biolabs. Was he ever included with this so-called research? I think that would be great to find out.
And I hope Rand Paul is on that. So that's one story. The pandemic, this new revelation about the biolabs brings up that. Now, another topic that's been on everyone's mind, remember the halcyon days about 6 weeks ago? Maybe not even that, maybe 4 weeks ago. Remember what everyone was talking about? It's a certain guy. Remember? Just think back. It seems like a long time ago now. Joe Rogan. Remember that?
Oh, yes, yeah, Joe Rogan.
Remember when all anyone could talk about was Joe Rogan? Why were they talking?
The biggest racist.
And why were they talking about Joe Rogan? Because censorship has been a big issue. How much is censorship a factor in this Ukraine-Russia war? Huge amount, right? We've never seen propaganda like this. We've never seen a country, hey, Ukraine, you lying mother hubbers. Look, this story, let's talk about the story. Did you hear, Rod, that Russia, those bastards, attacked a maternity hospital? How dare they? They hate pregnancy and babies. That's how evil Putin is, right? You heard that story. And that's about the way it's presented, correct?
Yeah, we got that. We have that in the clip with Ned Price talking about it and him saying that Russia was calling it fake news.
Right, and it is fake news. And the way we know that is the guys, the Nazis, the Azov battalion, who are in Mariupol, have been bragging. They've been out on the news bragging that they've taken a position at this abandoned maternity hospital that was no longer had patients in it as of the end of February. That's all established before this narrative came up in the past day. It was all established. You saw that. It was very clear that this is an abandoned maternity hospital. And did you see the lady who shows up like 3 different times?
Yeah, I did see that on Twitter. The people were pointing out that she's been at all these different events.
Right. That's a crisis actress, and the Oscar goes to Mariupol Marie or whatever they're calling her. But so this lying narrative about a maternity hospital, and Russia released evidence today. It looks like Russia didn't hit it at all. It looks like they blew it up with their own bombs, which would shock nobody. And they found red paint over there, all kinds of stuff. So so far we got the pandemic, we've got censorship because it's all over the place, and fake news. Now here's another story. Remember Russiagate, when all anybody could talk about for 4 years was Russiagate. Ukraine was right at the center of Russiagate, and I've been reporting that. And in the film Revealing Ukraine, and the director Igor Lopotnik will be joining us this half at the bottom of the hour. That's what I'm trying to spit out. I'm a professional, but sometimes my mouth doesn't work. So Igor Lopotnik will be joining us. In Revealing Ukraine, I talk about the connection, the central role Ukraine had in Russiagate, because they did have a central role in it. So what I'm seeing is a lot of stories that seem disparate all come together with Ukraine. Now, let me also give props the highest props I can give to Tucker Carlson. He did an 8-minute segment last night at the opening of his show about the bioweapons labs. And he pointed out that going into Victoria Nuland's admission, they were saying it was Russian disinformation, right? They were saying there's no biolabs. That's Russian disinformation. And that's one of the reasons that we had on this show on Monday, Juliana Gatenjeva. Juliana Gatenjeva is a brave, beautiful, and very smart investigative reporter who had dug up, she'd gone through, she did the boring work of research and documenting things. The U.S. admitting to these bioweapons labs. And I'll tell you what I said to Alex today. Now, of course, you've seen Eisenhower's farewell speech, right, Rod? Everyone's seen that. You've seen that, right? Of
course.
But you're a young man, and I'm an old man, but I'm not that old. I don't remember when Eisenhower gave his speech. But you know what? I'll bet the day after Eisenhower's farewell address, I'll bet people were talking about the tie he wore. I bet they weren't talking about the military-industrial complex. Because sometimes, you know, we were talking to Austin Pelley, who was the co-host of Fall Lines, when he was up in Ottawa doing great work up there. Austin, I asked him, are you aware you're in the middle of history right now? And he said, no, not really. He said, so it's a weird thing that happens sometimes. You're right in the middle of history. And right now, everybody watching, you're watching Radio Sputnik or listening, just listening, that's fine too. But you're watching history because we're the station and this is a show, and my work on this for a long time has been right at the center of this. But what we saw yesterday with Victoria Nuland admitting in front of Marco Rubio that there's biolabs, I don't think it's dawned on everybody yet how historical that was. My point about Eisenhower is I'll bet the day after Ike's speech, what I know didn't happen is the newspapers were not, hey, everybody, let's talk about that thing he said about the military-industrial complex. You see what I'm saying, Ron? There's just no way that they realized what they were seeing. I'll bet.
No, I agree with you on that. There's no way, especially back then with, what was it, like 3 ABC, NBC, and but CBS, the only media stations. I don't think anybody could even grasp what we're dealing with now.
I almost asked Alex today, you know, we should see if we can get Alex on the show. Because I'll tell you what I would have asked him. I almost did, but I was a guest, not a host. I wonder how Alex Jones felt when he broke into Bohemian Grove. You've seen the footage of the people literally worshiping the giant owl statue, right? You've seen that, right?
Yeah, no, I've seen it. The guys dancing around. I think they're kind of naked as well. So it's just a weird thing for a whole bunch of guys to be worshiping an owl naked.
So this had been rumored and whispered about for a long time. But Alex was the guy who broke into Bohemian Grove and actually saw it and videotaped it. I want to ask Alex how he felt, because I have a feeling, this is my guess. I'm not trying to put words into Alex Jones because that would be impossible anyway. But I bet he couldn't believe what he was seeing, and he knew something was going on, but here he was actually seeing it. Does that make sense, Rod? Because how could you believe that? You go, oh, well, look what I'm saying. It's almost like when you see some of the, wait, you've seen the picture of Klaus Schwab, where he looks like a space alien. He's dressed weird. He looks like a science fiction version of Dr. Evil. You've seen that, right?
Yeah, it's got the Power Ranger type outfit on.
Yes. So it's one of those things that's so weird. I wonder how Alex felt when he actually saw the people dancing around the giant owl. That may be when Alex snapped. If anything snapped in Alex, that may have done it right there. Because seriously, imagine seeing it, or imagine going to the bookstore right now, and people are like, "Oh, the Klaus Schwab thing. He's the latest boogeyman." Go look up the book, The Great Reset by Klaus Schwab. We see it on the bookshelf. You go, "Wait a second. I thought this was a bunch of BS." But here's the book. So I think what we saw yes with Victoria Nuland, was it yesterday? Was it the day before?
Day before, I believe.
Day before. Time flies when Victoria Nuland's having fun. But Victoria Nuland saying that, I don't think all of the implications, and Tucker, God bless Tucker Carlson, he's the only journalist on mainstream media in the world right now. He got it. He said, this raises a lot of questions, which is he's exactly right. I thought about that a few hours after I saw it. I was like, this raises way more questions. And the other thing that Tucker did, because he's a host on Fox, that's mainstream, he tried to get Marco Rubio on the show. Now, if Marco Rubio, Rod, nothing personal, but if Marco Rubio turns you down for an interview, you and I both get that, right? You wouldn't expect Marco Rubio to ever come on the show, ever. Correct?
No, not at all. Not at all.
But would you expect Marco Rubio to go on Tucker Carlson, one of the top-rated news shows in the nation? Yes, of course you would.
No, actually, I would. I don't, because Lindsey Graham doesn't go on there either. So I think those guys, the guys you talk about, like Lindsey Graham, Marco Rubio, Mitch McConnell, they would never go on Tucker because he would ask them the hard questions and make them either answer or their non-denials. And
they'll wait for Hannity to come on. By the way, we'll get to you in just 1 second. Who we got? We got commits Gary, then Brave, then Ingrid. That's the order. Gary, then Brave, then Ingrid. We'll get to you in just 1 second. Let me say one other thing, too. Rod, you sent me a clip the other night, and I don't know how to explain it. There were two guests, and one of them was Daniel McAdams. Daniel McAdams, who's the co-host of the Ron Paul podcast, and he's the executive director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. And Daniel was one of the guests, and it was like an Indian news show. Is that it? From India, the land, the foreign land.
Yes, yeah.
And Daniel McAdams was one of the guests, and the other guest was the editor of the Kyiv Times. And the host, the Indian guy, was yelling, Daniel McAdams, stop interrupting me. Because he said, Daniel McAdams, you're freaking out. Calm down, Daniel McAdams. And you watch the clip for like 5 minutes, and he keeps yelling at Daniel. And then finally, the guy whose lower third did not say Daniel McAdams, the guy in the bottom of the screen whose lower third said Kyiv Times, he starts going, why do you keep yelling at me? I haven't said a word. And it turned out that the Indian host was calling the wrong guy, Daniel McAdams. That Daniel was not the guy freaking out. That was the guy from the Kyiv Times. But that I'm describing that fairly accurately, right, Rod?
Yeah, you're describing it in a calm way, but Daniel, he was spazzing out because this guy keeps accusing him of being pro-Ukraine and all this other stuff, and he's telling him to stop interrupting him. But it's obviously not Daniel. It's another guy with a foreign accent. Yeah,
and we should get Daniel on if we can talk about that too, because it's an amazing clip, and I'm not doing it justice by just explaining it. Some things, I'll put it like this. Like, I could describe the song Stairway to Heaven by Zeppelin for you. It's not the same as hearing it. You need to hear it. Some things need to be experienced. But 202-521-1320, let's experience Gary. Gary, what's on your mind?
Hey, Lee, how you doing? I used to be a caller a long time ago from Massachusetts. So I just got a question for you. I was listening to my local radio station here today, and they had basically the same narrative on today about, Ukraine and Victoria Nuland. I remember you were talking about her years ago and everything with Chalupa and everything. And I remember donating to your book way back then about Epstein and then the keto diet and stuff. And I was just wondering if this is just another grift off the American people to screw them and lie to them so that they just keep your facade going, because I know you're Russian propaganda, and I'd just like to know if this is what's happening, because you're ruining people's lives.
Name a single person's lives I've ruined. First off, let's start with that. We'll work backwards.
You stole money from my family for a book and for a diet you never produced, okay?
We did do a class on the keto thing, and I was in the middle of a divorce that I was and was having health problems, and I appreciate it, but just rather than come on the radio and freak out, I didn't ruin your family's life. I didn't take thousands of dollars from anybody. The book, I think, was $20 or something like that. So if that ruined your life, sorry, but you can always get in touch with me. I have a new class coming out, and I'll just comp you to it on the situation with Ukraine and Russia, because now I've been able to stabilize my life. But you accuse me of being Russian propaganda. Name one thing I've ever said that's incorrect. Name one thing.
You do is promote Russia and RT.
No. Okay. Right. I do promote Russia. Name one thing I've said that's incorrect. One thing I've said that's wrong.
You were blaming Angela Chalupa way back when for all this stuff in Ukraine, in Victoria. It's not true. You were pushing the Trump narrative.
No, wait a second. No, I wasn't. I was saying that Alexander Chalupa went to the embassy in Ukraine and, against the law, went to a place called the Open World Leadership Center on Capitol Hill. Everything I said, name one thing I said that's incorrect. Alexander Chalupa's email. Anybody can look up. What you are is you're a Russia hater, and that's fine. I've let you say your piece, but name one single solitary thing, one thing I've said that's incorrect. Can you name one?
I just told you. Your whole narrative is incorrect. It's pro-Putin.
No. Wait. State my narrative. If you misstate my narrative, you can't just make up what my narrative is. What I said was Alexander Chalupa conspired with the Ukrainian embassy. That's clear. All anybody has to do is look up.
Clear. There's no evidence of that. Why wasn't she arrested for it? Where's Hillary's emails with Guccifer 2? You said you got information from Guccifer 2. That's Russian disinformation.
No, it's not. No, it's not. In fact, it's clear. I did get emails from Guccifer 2, and I never said there were Hillary's emails. What I said was, and everything I said about Alexander Chalupa, don't misstate the narrative. You can find it if you go to type in WikiLeaks, Ali Chalupa. You'll find the email from her. If you go to a podcast called Gaslit Nation, she admits she was collaborating with the Ukrainian embassy. She just doesn't see anything wrong with it. So what you've done so far is not a single solitary thing I said was incorrect. And just because you misstate what I say the narrative, I don't have a narrative. I have facts. Ali Chalupa coordinated with the Ukrainian embassy. She sent an email to Luis Miranda, the comms director. That's true. Not only did I get emails from Guccifer 2, but that's in one of the indictments. So it's clear that the U.S. government thought I got emails from Guccifer 2. But I have the emails that can show the back and forth with Breitbart. First off, don't do it anywhere. But if you think you're going to lie to my face, well, you can't name a single solitary thing I've ever said that's wrong. Not one. It should be easy for you, since I ruined your life. It should be easy for you to name one thing, but you can't do it. 202-521-1320. Brave, are you going to yell at me? Because that's fine if you want to.
No, I don't have any desire to yell at you. I think the last caller, I don't know. I think the last caller, I won't even comment on the last caller. I think people like that, they're entitled to their opinions or perspectives or outlooks, but those particular people are, I think those particular people are reinforcing this great narrative and allowing it to succeed, because anyone that's just watched a smidgen of what's going on in politics or at least political punditry, there's no way you cannot walk away from watching mainstream media, say CNN or whatever the case is, and not feel dirty or not feel like you're being lied to, especially now. So I think people like that, I think that they will. I think they are all bought in, and it's that mass formation thing where they're not going to wake up until they wake up. I mean, there's still people that believe that Russiagate was actually factual and not a corrupt narrative. So I can't do it by people like that. I personally just try to my blood pressure low by not dealing with people like that too often, unless I actually have to. But the reason why I was actually calling in, and let me also say that you've been very informative as far as I'm concerned. I don't know about the book stuff and all of that, but I don't have any information on that. But as far as long as I've been listening to the show, I may disagree with some things that you said here and there concerning the Black Panthers, right? But you've been very informative on matters, especially where it applies to the whole Russiagate narrative and things of that nature. That led me to be able to gain even more information by leading me in the right direction and to research stuff on my own. So I don't know, everybody's entitled to their opinion, so that guy can have his opinion. But I was calling in to make note, just as I did what by any means necessary, to make note of the defense hearings that are going on, and just to stress that everyone should be listening to them, because a lot of the things that are being said, they are still pushing Russiagate as if it was real. Tom Cotton and Marco Rubio, even though Marco Rubio got shunned and tattered in the conservative media, so he came back today and tried to push a little bit harder, but all he really did was give platform or give room for Victoria Nuland and her crew to cover down themselves and put it all off on Russia. I just really feel like everyone should be. These are the things that we should be paying attention to, because what these senators and congressmen are pushing in this hearing is extremely mind-boggling. It's crazy. They want boots on the ground.
The bioweapons story is a big story, and that's why. Like I want to make sure we get to Ingrid too. Great call, Brave. Thanks very much. But the peace and justice movement, people like Medea Benjamin from Code Pink should be in the back of the room standing up and heckling Marco Rubio, and not out there attacking Russia or launching an attack when there was now evidence that, in fact, Ukraine was getting ready to launch a very big attack in eastern Ukraine. And it was obvious the British were sending them weapons. They weren't just sending them to take a look at because they thought it'd be nice in pictures. There was a big Ukraine attack planned by Ukraine in eastern Ukraine, in the Donbass. But 202-521-1320. Ingrid, D.C., what's on your mind?
If I understood the last part of what Brave was saying, I want to agree with him. There have been several people on Sputnik actually posts saying, what's wrong with Victoria Nuland? Did she slip up? Was she caught in the headlights? And I don't think that's true. I think this was intentional, purposeful damage control, because there is so much evidence and more is going to come out. There's no way that she could deny it. And this may have actually been set up with Marco Rubio to quickly shift it into this accusation and fear-mongering about the Russians. And on the biolabs, I don't know the bottom of it, but there's a comment on an article on the Saker blog that a former minister, Ukrainian minister, had said somewhere that the Maidan coup, part of the cause of that was that he was trying to remove the American biolabs from Ukraine, and this was one of the root causes of this overthrow. His name was Azarov. I don't know.
Oh, it's very interesting. Yeah, see, I was trying to say before, I don't know if it was clear. I don't think all of the implications of this biolab thing right now as we sit here are clear to us. And they're not clear to me, and I've been covering this story for a while. By the way, 2 callers, Tarif, Medea, call back at the top of the hour. We don't have time right now because I want to make sure we have enough time for Igor Lopotnik. But I wonder what the implications are. The first obvious question is who knew what when? What politicians knew about this and at what point? And, you know, I did I do a show once a week with Jason Goodman. And I was saying to Jason on our show, our Patreon show, that the obvious thing to do here, if you're a journalist and if you have any kind of resources, is to go find people who in Ukraine who worked at those labs, and not just scientists and the leaders of the lab. Find the janitors and the guy down the street who delivered pizza there and the receptionist. Because if we start interviewing those people and they say, oh, yeah, we were told never to go in that door, that's the kind of, what I'm saying is, you don't always need the top level people to start really unearthing things. And any journalist worth their salt, it's obvious, you start looking for people who may have worked at the labs. But you watch, nobody's going to do it. Jason looked it up last night. I've not confirmed it yet. But I understand Breitbart has nothing about the Victoria Nuland story. As of last night, nothing at all about it, which is disgusting. Andrew Breitbart is rolling in his grave. Now, let's take a short break. When we come back, honored to have the great director, Igor Lopotnik, who was way ahead of this and whose films Ukraine on Fire and Revealing Ukraine are being censored right now. We'll talk to Igor about his films and about the censorship he's facing, and more importantly, how you can avoid the censorship and watch the films. There's ways to get around it. Thank God for services like Rumble and even Vimeo. Right now, the films are still up there. We got more coming up with Igor Lopotnik here on The Backstory.
Want to talk? Get in touch with us at radio@sputniknews.com.
So, Sean, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, Bob, that's easy. I want to talk about the need to stop the development of self-driving cars.
Again, Sean, you're driving me nuts. I think the self-driving car thing's already out of the gate.
No. It's never too late. See, now the leading experts in the field, I mean, just pick one, whichever one, leading experts have repeatedly warned us about the dangers of artificial intelligence. Look, I'm telling you, man, we have to stop the robots by any means necessary.
I see what you did there.
Yep.
Tune into our show By Any Means Necessary daily from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Radio Sputnik. And don't forget to call in at 3:20 p.m. to our studio number 202-521-1320.
And if you miss us live, check us out on SputnikNews.com, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date on the latest political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us.
Feeling kind of blue, but maybe also kind of red, and kind of purple, and kind of alone? You've got a friend on Radio Sputnik. Tune into Political Misfits from 12 to 2 Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, for news, politics, and culture without the two-party bias. Catch us daily on 105.5 in Washington, D.C., or 102.9 or 104.7 in Kansas City. Or find us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your news.
Are you bored? Are you lonely? Do you need a hug? Well, we can't give you that, but we can keep you up to date on Radio Sputnik.
We are back, 105.5 FM, AM 1390 in Washington, D.C., despite the best efforts of the Washington Post. Joining us now, the great film director, Igor Lopotnik. He directed these films that are absolute must-sees, Ukraine on Fire and Revealing Ukraine. I'm in the film Revealing Ukraine. Very honored to be in there because I was such a fan of Ukraine on Fire. Igor, how you doing?
Hi, Lee. Good to hear from you. Thank you for having me. We're good. We fight back the big tech and censorship.
No, exactly right. So first off, thanks so much for coming on, because this is starting to make some headlines a little bit. That now, let's think about this. So Ukraine on Fire was the first film you did. And executive producer Oliver Stone, and there's interviews in there that Oliver Stone had done with Vladimir Putin. And I think it's the definitive film to understand Ukraine and understand the 2014 Maidan coup that led to the current thing. Now, this is a document. Yeah, go ahead, Igor.
That's a 4 films what we've done on Ukrainian topics, on Ukrainian crisis. First was in 2014, was no long 1-hour documentary called Maidan Massacre. That documentary when we investigate shooting on the Maidan. Second one was a big, major documentary with Oliver Stone, executive produced, and interview. He did not only with Mr. Putin, he also interviewed Ukrainian President Yanukovych on the run on that time of interview. And he also interviewed Minister of the Internal Affairs, for like a Chief of Police of Ukraine, for that film. We also have brilliant Robert Perry, who explained all situation in Ukraine, especially how it's related to the story of growing Nazi movement in Ukraine by CIA and by State Department from United States. That was premiered in 2016. It's won an award for Best Documentary on International Taormina Film Festival in Italy. Have a great reception, and we was everywhere in the world because it was matter of war and peace on this time. And after that, in 2019, as you remember, we met in Washington, D.C. I interviewed you personally for Revealing Ukraine. That was a continuation as well with Oliver Stone. And we also reached to Vladimir Putin, and we reached to heavyweight opposition leader of Ukrainian oppositions, and this time Viktor Medvedchuk and his wife. And we interviewed him as well. And you, Professor Kachanovsky, who was specialized on all that studying of this, all killings on the Maidan Square, was also our contributor for that film. That also won, and it was awarded and a Grand Prix of Taormina, and it was screened everywhere, and we was everywhere. Until very last week, the YouTube just shut down our copy for the friends. You know, we're not using YouTube for distribution. This is only reserved copy. But last days, that copy started to be trending, and it's exponentially grow of viewership and comments. On the time when the YouTube shut it down, that was 360,000 of views and more than 3,000 comments. And people was very thankful for having this ability to watch that film with no payment at all. We use the Apple TV, Amazon, and other outlets to make some revenue, little one. Trust me, it's not a very big. But YouTube go to the censoring our film, and that's thanks to our friends. First of all, Oliver Stone, of course, and second of all, Glenn Greenwald and others, and the people from Rumble. We got very, very quick support, and we now having, I believe, more than 260,000 of views on the Rumble. 228,000, I'm sorry. And, of course, we seized any advertisement. We cancel everything. We distributed that for free just because we want our audience to decide if they agreed with the information, with the movie, and we want to make people see their films.
No, and I should point out, the reason I mentioned it's such a big deal to me that Vladimir Putin's in them. I want to hear about Vladimir Putin from Vladimir Putin. I already know the Western media here hates Vladimir Putin. So I'll put it like this. If I want to see a bio of Joe Biden and learn what Joe Biden thinks, I'm not going to watch a Donald Trump interview about Joe Biden. I know Donald Trump doesn't like Biden. I want to see Biden himself. And there's plenty of opportunities to see Biden himself. This is one of the only opportunities to see Vladimir Putin in his own words. And one of the great things you've done, now there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about. One of the things I want to talk about is the film that came out. Your film's called Ukraine on Fire. Netflix did a documentary after your film called Winter on Fire. Did you think there was a deliberate attempt to confuse people about these two films?
First of all, I have very little. I think very bad about Winter and Fire. It's a brutal propaganda, and it's done by the. I can call the director a fraud because he defrauded me myself 2 years before I went. On my first year when I came to America, I was coming as executive producer, and I bring an investor to his film. And he fired me. He kicked me off and never paid to me, never paid to investors. That guy was really have a long story of doing fraud. He was defrauding the very famous, sometime B-movie producer. I forget what company was named, Canon Film. Menachem Golan.
Right.
He defrauded.
Yeah, go. Yes.
Yeah, he's a Russian guy. He's immigrated to Israel first. They kicked his ass out of Israel. He moved to United States. He appeared in my office in Kiev, in Ukraine, and asked me for money for the film. I see the script. It was legit script, and I give him an investor. So he defrauded investor. He defrauded me, and after that, what's happening during the Ukrainian crisis? He emerged in Kiev again. He gathered around him few people who do that documentary filming on Maidan, promised to them Academy Award, etc., etc., take the hard drives with material and leave the country. They cut the film. They cut the first. It was a kind of Pray for Ukraine, something like that. They screened that film in Kiev. Nobody cared. Movie has no traction. He came back to the United States, and here he met producers from Netflix who groomed him, gave him some additional money, recut the film, and submitted to Academy Award, to Oscar. You know what, Lee? It's interesting because Academy has a strict regulation. Movie what was already screened or movie what exists more than 10% film what was already on the screen cannot be qualified to be an Academy run. You know, because of political necessity and the new Cold War, they closed the eye on this. They give him a nomination, and he's now Academy guy. Can you imagine that fraud is Academy guy? This is how low how Academy fall. And after that, the people from Ukraine come to Los Angeles. He shut his phone. He switched off the phone. And people were standing on the Hollywood Boulevard without tickets, without invitation. And imagine how they feel, because they make that film. The guy just stole the film, bring it to Academy Award, was picked up by our political people who want to push this narration, what was in the film. And they nominate him for that. People sue him. That people go everywhere. They try to even reach me and ask me about, I know that story very well. After that, you know what he did? He come to Syria, and HBO granted him the money to make the movie about, it was a TV series, Cry Out of Syria, and it's all about, some kind of dealing with the white helmets. So the guy, Evgeny Zhirinovsky, is complete fraud as well as his film. What his film doing? He's mythologizing, and they do presenting as a heroes, innocent, dumb people who was used as a meat to put in front of snipers who killed them. This is ridiculous. This is so low moral level to present people as a freedom fighters who just doomed to be a target on a staged media event to present the killing on Maidan Square as a brutal action of President Yanukovych. We for the 8 years that investigation of Maidan massacre coming in Ukraine, nobody was prosecuted. You know what? Because it's very hard to accuse people from the special forces for killing, because real evidence is against that. We did our own investigation. We visit undercover the Maidan Square, and we find the people who said on camera how they killed protesters and the police. And more and more, finally, this is a common knowledge. The leaders of opposition, what's called Klitschko, Tagnibok, and Turchinov and Yatsenyuk, they used the neo-Nazi and amateurish snipers, hired guns to kill protesters because they was told in American embassy, they was told to do so because they need 100. And they try to reach this limit. We talk about this in Revealing Ukraine. Try to reach the numbers, 100 people killed, to ignite the media buzz and the media outrage, especially in the West. They succeed, people was killed, and they built all new regime in Ukraine based on this blood and that massacre. This is why I believe that ongoing military operation, this is not a start of the war. This is the end of the war. Because everything what started like that, it never will be stable, never will be for people. It's all, not a revolution, but armed coup d'etat against a democratically elected government. And it's led to all these consequences. 8 years, exactly 8 years from the day of Maidan killing, when the Ukrainians crossed all red lines of Russia. And I believe that red lines was they built up the 125,000 military forces on the border with Donbass, ready to attack in the end of February. And as evidence is captured now during this event in Ukraine showing, they have a direct order to attack. They was already in the process of heating up and preparing and heating up the force. Second one, they was developing the nuclear weapons with help from United States. They were doing this in the Chernobyl nuclear station, but as I'm very familiar because I filmed one of my films on a reactor on a block number 3 in Chernobyl back to 2012, 2011. And they also used that nuclear research facility institute in Kharkiv. And they also use somehow the Zaporozhye nuclear plant, biggest nuclear plant in Europe. And all Russian type of reactors, they call it RMBK, they can produce not only the electricity. That reactor in Chernobyl, that can produce the enrichment uranium. So,
Igor, let me stop you before you continue, because I really want to underline this point. And I think it's very significant. I really haven't heard people talk about it. We saw that Russia did target in the sense that they focused forces on these nuclear plants, Chernobyl and the other one. And you're saying part of the reason you think that Russia did that is that you think Ukraine was using those plants to develop nuclear weapons because those plants can enrich uranium. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, correct. Especially Chernobyl plant can do that. And you know what also importantly, that radiation, neutron emission from Chernobyl contaminated area and from uranium was sitting under the sarcophagus, the confinement what the Ukrainians built with the help of European Union and entire world over this the destroyed number 3 block of nuclear plant. That emit a lot of neutrons. So if you try to hide something, when you're experimenting with building the tactical nukes, you have no better place in the world than Chernobyl nuclear station. This is very important. And you know what? I see that on a Telegram channels related to Russians, what the people who was working on Chernobyl nuclear station, they surrender, they give up to Russian nuclear engineers the material, data, evidences about all wrongdoings, what Ukrainians do for these 8 years on the Chernobyl station. So we can expect something very solid emerge very soon. And regarding
I just want to emphasize that you're saying very soon because they captured data. We're going to hear more about the fact that Ukraine and are you saying the U.S. must have been involved, right?
Yeah, as the Russians claimed, and I think they have something to show because it's not like not a baseless claim. Even the United States transferred the nuclear material to Ukrainians to help them to speed up that development. So I believe this, and building up forces to attack Donbass, and building the nuclear. And you know what? Ukraine has a tremendous capacity to do nuclear weapons. They have uranium in the city called Zoltaya Vody, yellow waters. Uranium mining facility. They have the scientific facility in Kharkiv, and they have the big plant that can easily build the middle-range or short-range missiles, ballistic missiles, maybe not so precise, what that in Dnipropetrovsk, Yuzhmash. So Ukraine has a capacity to regain the nuclear status in the half of the year. So I believe that was a last drop of crossing the red lines of Russia, because imagine we now see how many people dying, and it's sad, and it's very horrible to see how the innocent civilians hitting and dying because it's a war. Even it's a military operation, limited, but it's a war. And because of that, imagine how big casualty will be if Ukraine will gain tactical nukes and use it to liberate, for example, Crimea. How big losses we will have, the wet dream of our neoliberals and neocons, limited nuclear war in Europe. So practically, I believe that's why Russia take that steps. Because when you corner the Russian bear, and you corner him with the possibility to, and you know what, to build a dirty bomb and to make, for example, like a half of Crimea unlivable or half of the Moscow unlivable, they don't need anything. They have everything what they need for the building a dirty bomb. And you know what? This is a very little of public statements by Ukrainian president, but in his last speech in Munich, 19th February, he said that Ukraine regret what they signed at Budapest Agreement in 2014 and give up third biggest in the world nuclear arsenal. They regret about that. They openly discuss in the parliament of Ukraine rebuilding of nuclear weapons. So imagine that guy under tremendous pressure of neo-radicals, Ukrainian Nazi, and they pressuring him to develop the nuclear weapon.
Now let me ask you. Let me go back to the Maidan coup for a second, because I want to ask you about something I've been seeing lately very clearly. I think Viktor Yanukovych, who was the democratically elected ruler, I'm going to call him a neutral figure. He's been made out by D.C. as a Putin puppet. But I think when I look at Yanukovych, he is not a EU hater. He looked at the EU proposal, but the reason they got rid of him was because he also looked at the Russian proposal. Not that he was biased. I don't think he was actually biased towards either one. But when he looked at the deal, do you think Viktor Yanukovych was a pretty neutral leader when it comes to Russia versus EU, and that's why they wanted to get rid of him, Igor?
You know what? First of all, I believe that's not people of Ukraine who want to join Europe. No, not at all. They have no idea about that. All people who live in Ukraine, Ukrainians, has no problem to visit Europe with visa. It was so easy to arrange. They even go and work illegally in Europe, and there's a lot of people and come back to their country. It was nothing about that. That was the interest of oligarchs who want to have what? They want to have cheap energy from Russia and a free export to Europe. to benefit from that. So that's why Rinat Akhmetov build up that narration. He take the money and use his money, take the European support, and build up narration we're going to be in associate agreement with Europe. What does it mean? This is a trade agreement. This is just a trade, and Russia was against that, not because the Russians hate Europe or Russians won the war. No, or Russians hate Ukrainians. Russians was afraid of that because they 15 years negotiate WTO, World Trade Organization conditions, protecting Russian industries and open up this very wisely and carefully constructed. And now Ukraine just opened up the border and said, everybody welcome. So, and they have a free trade agreement with Russia. So Russia immediately stepped in and said, you need to negotiate it with us. We need to be part. And the Europeans said, no, fuck you. We don't want you here. We will.
Okay.
Ukrainian.
Igor, we got to watch out for the FCC, so you got to watch the language. Let me just point that out.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's okay.
That's how it's happened. But, yeah. And this happened. So Yanukovych probably was a Russian Lenin, especially in the very end of his term. Because when he understands that Europe don't give him any money for be in the trade agreement with Europe, he just postponed signing of agreement in Vilnius. And they immediately jump on this and organize the Maidan. They was planning Maidan for 2015, for next election. That was premature move. And the West was disappointed, but as soon as Victoria Nuland understand this is a perfect opportunity to do regime changing, they start working together.
Now, speaking of Nuland, let me ask you, because we only got a couple minutes left. Great appearance. Thanks so much, Igor, for coming on. Were you shocked, maybe not surprised, but shocked at least, that Victoria Nuland admitted that Ukraine's got bio research labs? Were you shocked by that?
No, because I know it from old. They start building that lab in 2010, so they have that's a proof of funding, and it's millions of dollars was spent. It's already public everywhere. I will send to you this Ternopil, Dnipropetrovsk. It's everywhere. This is a lab. And you know who was a donor for this? Donors who fund that. It's the Department of Defense of United States of America. So you cannot find that fact. This is why Victoria Nuland tried to do the damage control, because they will be exposed another time, and they wrongdoing. We're exposing them all the time, and now it's biolabs a big.
Now, the final question I want to ask you. I want to ask you this guy, the oligarch, Ukrainian oligarch Kolomoisky. Now, what we're hearing from everybody is there can't be Nazis in Ukraine because Zelensky is Jewish, but Kolomoisky is also Jewish, is my understanding, and there's not a question in the world. He's the guy who funded the Azov battalion, correct?
Yes. You know, Lee, what? During even Hitler time in Europe, in a Third Reich, that was a Nazi who was a Jewish and it's existing fact. And it was brutal and nasty Nazi. And they was Jewish by the nation. This has nothing to do with the nation. This is ideology of supremacy. This is like a virus. What if you was infected by that virus? I believe only one thing, as it happened in 1945, the Russian troop with a red flag on the top of Reichstag, and that Nazis come hiding in the holes. This is why I'm calling this liberation. Sorry, this, of course, somebody in Ukraine who facing this like a war time, and who is hiding in the basements. They think it's not proper words. But I know you cannot change the Nazi mind with films, the poems, or articles. Against the Nazi, it's only one remedy. This is the Red Army. Sorry to say, this is an army of Russians who is hating Nazi on a DNA level, because the 27 million people was lost in the war against that enemy.
Igor, hey, we're out of time. So would you recommend Rumble's a place people can go watch Ukraine on Fire for free at Rumble, right?
Watch Ukraine on Fire, watch Revealing Ukraine, And we also will post a third installment that's called Ukraine, 30 Years of Independence, the Everlasting Present. That's our third film on the topic. And I promise to my audience we're going to film more. We're going to film another film about ongoing events.
That's a great promise. Igor Lopotnik, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for creating these films. It's the best way for people to learn about it. And we'll talk to you later, Igor. We got more coming up right after this break on the best damn news show in the world. I'm Lee Stranahan. This is The Backstory.
Listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
And we are back, and it's time for the second hour of a Thursday edition of the best damn talk show in the world. I'm independent investigative journalist Lee Stranahan. This is The Backstory. Really want to thank Igor Lopotnik once again. His films, Ukraine on Fire and Revealing Ukraine, you can watch them free on Rumble. So check them out and do it because they're trying to censor the truth. They don't want to censor Igor's films because they're fake. They want to censor them because they bring people in a compelling way the reality of what happened in 2014 to set off what happened with this Russian war. It was started in 2014. It's a U.S. war. And Russia's pushing back against what's happening. An absolutely stunning revelation in that interview that coming soon, evidence, Igor's saying, that they were developing nukes at Chernobyl and this other nuclear power plant there in Ukraine. Great interview with Igor. Coming up later this hour, we have John Kiriakou, former CIA whistleblower, and my former talk show partner on this show, Backstory. Okay, I want to quickly get to calls. Medea's calling back, but we're going to go to Millie in Texas first. 202-521-1320. Hey, Millie, how you doing? What's on your mind?
Hi, guys. I just wanted to let y'all know that since Igor was removed on YouTube, everybody has been watching it like wildfire on a website called Gab. I signed on Gab, and it was like the whole flood was just all his movie content. So it is.
No, it's a Streisand effect, right? Where haven't they learned that when you censor something, people want to watch it more, right, Millie?
Absolutely, and I say the same thing about Andrei Nekrasov, is that his last name?
Yes, Nekrasov, yeah.
Yeah, and his is on BitChute, and that as well needs to be watched because they kind of go hand in hand with a lot of the same bad actors, like Bill Browder. But
right, and when people see Ukraine on fire, they're going to see why it was banned because it's exposing a truth that does not fit into the narrative. And I've never seen a narrative do a faceplant, to use a skater term, like this narrative. It's that Victoria Nuland thing. Millie, what did you think of the Victoria Nuland revelation with Marco Rubio the other day?
I got a giggle because she was lying so poorly that she said Ukraine wrong. It was like, Ukraine?
Yes, it was funny. Yeah, it was. I also like the way she said, we're very concerned, the research material. Remember that she was talking about research material. And you could tell she wanted to say weapons, but she couldn't because that would have let the cat out of the bag too much. But do you also agree that Victoria Nuland, if you were a State Department, and this would be awesome, Millie, if you were, but if you were a State Department official, would you want Victoria Nuland to shut her yap and not let her anywhere near any microphone ever again?
I wouldn't let her near my mop to mop the floor.
There we go. Millie, thanks for the call. 202-521-1320. Let's go to Medea. Medea in Australia, I believe. Hey, Medea, how you doing?
Yeah, good, Lee. I would like to speak about Hillary Clinton on her Twitter. What she said.
Wait, Medea cut out there. Am I correct on that, Command Central?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, you just cut out there. Go ahead. Start again.
Have you seen the Twitter on Hillary Clinton? How she say, the Russian president is a war crime?
No, I've not.
She was saying about the attack on the Mariupol attacking the hospital.
Yes, and this hospital narrative, talk about a narrative that fell apart completely. I'm not shocked that Hillary's, they're trying to push Russia war crimes because they know, in fact, that Ukraine's committed war crimes. And, by the way, I'll tell you who else has, is the United States. This bioweapons lab blanketing Ukraine, we've not heard the last of this. And I think these are war crimes. And the U.S. wants to do exactly what Victoria Nuland accused Russia of doing, which is accuse the accuser. But thanks to the call, Medea, let's go to Tarif, our friend Tarif in Louisiana. What's on your mind?
I have three comments. First, I'd like to say free joint science. First comment is this: Russia is going to default on the loans to the West, and the West is going to default on to the loans to Russia. They won't be able to pay the bills because of the sanctions, and the European, they're going to start issuing out more sanctions against Russia because they're nervous now. The things dealing with the biolabs, from reading the reports on the internet and the Russia Defense Ministry, that they already have evidence for documentation and eyewitnesses that the workers that worked in the biolabs in Ukraine of what they was working on. They have documentation and witnesses saying that they had samples in those Ukrainian biolabs, samples of coronavirus that they was already working on from bat coronavirus, excuse me. And also, they also say that even Georgia might have biolabs as well. So that's my third part. My last part is dealing with these neo-Nazis, gang members, these criminals. They also part in the dope game too. They have found when they overrun, when the Chechen rebels the Chechens and the Russians were overrun their position, they will find drug labs, right? And they found out that it's rumored that once this war is over, that they're going to spray the Azov battalion gang members, neo-Nazis, going to spray throughout Europe with those weapons, and they're going to probably be selling them and also using these weapons and selling dope on the market. So you might have an increase in gang violence in Europe dealing with these Azov battalion fellas. That's it.
Well, yeah, no, and there's two important issues there, Sharif. Zelensky not only was handing out AK-47s like there's so much Poroshenko chocolate, and he was. They were literally handing out AK-47s, and this footage, you could hear the streets lit up with gunfire later that night, because when you hand out AK-47s, not everyone who takes them is a patriotic hero. But the other thing is he let out prisoners. That's a great combination. Brilliant move, Zelensky. But a lot of those prisoners, and they're not going to go back. And again, the idea was they'll get out and they'll fight Russia. But you know what? They don't want to fight. They want to go back to doing what they were doing, which was gang stuff, the stuff that landed them in prison in the first place. 202-521-1320. Let's go to Mike. Hey, Mike, what is on your mind?
Hey, Lee. I missed you for lunch today, but I understand.
Yes, you did. I'm sorry. I had to do the Alex Jones thing.
I get it. But
no, yeah.
You know me, I'm a bit left of center, and I'm following this like the rest of the world. And because of our friendship, I've been following you. I'm just curious, you're really challenging me as a friend to consider the other side. You and I have talked about trying to be open-minded and listening to each other. Can you give me the Cliff Notes version of why what I hear from National Public Radio, BBC, everything else is jaded, and help me understand your point of view.
Now, can I mention who you are? Is it okay with you? I don't want to do it without it being okay with you.
I'm Mike. I'm a friend of yours in South Dakota.
Mike's a friend of mine in South Dakota, and that's fine. That's why I asked. So Mike's a friend of mine in South Dakota, and he and I have talked politics many times. And it's the same thing that I saw in 2013 with the Syrian war. When it comes to foreign policy, first off, I think it's obvious that suddenly Democrats and Republicans get along perfectly on foreign policy when it involves, I'll put it like this, how long were they couldn't pass any infrastructure bill? But now that there's $13 billion for Ukraine, suddenly Democrats and Republicans come together and pass it in 2 days. So I think one thing that's objectively true is that the Democrats and Republicans, when it comes to foreign policy, they're able to come to agreement. And when you get that kind of agreement instantly, the media, I'll call it the establishment media, I'll tell you who else. Fox, we were talking about Sean Hannity before. Sean Hannity is taking the same position as the New York Times, the Washington Post, NPR, and so on. There's not a lick of difference between them. So in the same way that politicians come together on U.S. foreign policy, the media outlets come together on it. And it's always in favor of war. Always. That's always the way they break it down. And this is especially true in the wake of 9/11 and the invasion of Iraq. You could see it a little bit then. It's gotten much worse. And I saw it on Syria, where that was under the Obama administration. We went into Syria. And the United States was backing Al-Qaeda and ISIS. That's who we were backing. And I know this because I went over Lebanon and I interviewed people, and they were like, what's the U.S. doing? They didn't understand it. They said, why are you supporting Al-Qaeda? And I didn't know. But what I've learned is if you want to get, in South Dakota, we got people like John Thune. Republicans like John Thune agree with Democrats like Chuck Schumer when it comes to wars. So that's what I think one way to look at it is to go, well, if you go, well, why are they doing it? It's a good question. Why do they all agree on war? And I think it's because it's sort of a mutually assured destruction thing that both Democrats and Republicans administrations, by the way, I was hopeful that when Trump came in, he would reverse some of the foreign policy problems that I saw came up during Obama's administration, like Syria. In fact, Trump ended up doubling down on what Obama had done in Syria. And I think he was better in some ways, but not ultimately, really. And especially in Syria, Trump launched missiles. And you notice when he launched missiles, that's when Fareed Zakaria and people at CNN were like, oh, look, he's acting presidential now. So that's what I've noticed. Does that help at all, Mike?
Absolutely. I remember something that you said early on, a week or two ago in the conflict, that like one of the worst offenders of human existence is the CIA, the deep state, I forget exactly what your words were, but I was listening to Mehdi Hassan, right? The opposite end of the spectrum. It's like, yes, America has some serious blood on our hands, and it's very frustrating. But I think that, like, I've also seen you post about whataboutism. Like, I'm still not convinced that what Russia is doing in Ukraine is a good thing. You know, like, two wrongs just keep making the world worse. Like, I think that there's good reason to be frustrated about the way that the United States and NATO and the way we have operated in the world, especially in the last 20 years, but like especially since World War II. But I don't know that I'm in full agreement with you on Russia's movements lately. And
like Alex Jones pointed out to me, I am obsessed on this stuff. And so one of the advantages, maybe it's an advantage, maybe it's not, that I have coming into this is I was already, like, the Nazification thing. I knew about the Nazis already. I've been talking about them for a long time. The Banderites. So what Putin was saying wasn't news to me. It was like, well, yeah, I'm glad he's talking about it now. And I think it was like that for a lot of people. But Mike, I got to move on because I got a couple of calls. But I'll see you tomorrow. That's my plan.
All right.
Okay?
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. No, thanks for calling, Mike. Appreciate it. And I will see you tomorrow. And 202-521-1320. Let's go to and get your mind out of the gutter if I say we have two Peters on. Stop it. Grow up. But go with Command Central. Pick a Peter. Go for it. Peter in Chicago. Let's do that one.
How you doing? How you doing, Lee?
Good. What's up?
Yeah, I want to give you another narrative about those biolabs. And probably catching my accent, I'm Bulgarian, living last 5 years in Chicago. But let me give you a story which kind of started making sense. A couple years ago, there was a flu going on, infecting all the pigs around the world. Actually, not around the world, mostly Africa, Europe, Asia.
Yes.
Those things, surprisingly, North America was not affected or less affected. And kind of the thing was when the trade war started, at a certain point China banned pork from USA. There was a certain point Russia was one of the biggest exporters to China. Then the problems with those flu started in Europe. On the beginning, I was in Bulgaria even. There was hundreds of millions of pigs supposed to be killed in there. I have friends owning hundreds of thousands of that kind of animals in the farming in Bulgaria. I know personally one of the biggest businessmen in that. And on the conversation, on the beginning, all these problems, they started coming from Africa. Surprisingly, couldn't spread enough because of the big Muslim population and landmass between Africa and Asia. And there was a second hot spot, surprisingly coming, they said, from Ukraine and Romania. Putting those things together, listening the report from the Chinese government talking about all those 100 labs, and many of them in Africa, and who knows how many in Romania, Bulgaria, and Ukraine. But how come hotspot from Africa, and then a couple months later, after everything is almost under control, there's another spread coming from Ukraine in north of Romania. And pretty much the most affected was the Russian producer.
No, it's very, very interesting. So you're saying there was, when we had Dilyana Gengieva on the show before, she talked a little bit about how there were, having the biolabs, you're saying they've had other effects, right?
I want to say they're not only used, assumably, to produce weapons against the humanity, many times it's used to control market, to be used as an economical weapon.
Yeah, that's a big deal, and nobody's even begun to deal with the fact. I think what you're saying from the stuff of Dilyana's I've read, it does seem the point you're making that these biolabs have an economic effect too. The ways to control markets, there are ways to take out crops or cattle or that kind of thing. That's a big deal, and nobody's talking about that yet. And that's why I say I think all of the implications of what Victoria Nuland revealed the other day settled it once and for all. There are weapons. There are she called research material. But again, there's no way. They're not just, they were not developing a more potent Flintstone chewable over there. Clearly, there's military uses. And you're pointing out, Peter, from Chicago, there are also economic uses. And that's a very big deal. Great call. So let's go. Was Peter, California? Is that next Command Central? So let's go to Peter in California. Go ahead, Peter.
Live. It's live with Lee Stranahan in the backstory. How are you, Lee?
Good. What's going on?
Well, I enjoy your show. I first found you back in the crazy, really unresolved Vegas shooting years ago. And that was a wild one that's still unsolved to this day. I mean, the backstory, we'll never know. But
yeah, a number of questions have not been resolved in that should have been in a normal world. But keep going, Peter.
Well, the other day, a young gal, quite attractive, as you would say, easy on the eyes, I believe. I think she worked for independently, but was with InfoWars for a bit, maybe. But she put a nice piece together, kind of. It was just, I think, put out a month ago, and it's a 2-hour clip. But man, it really lays down all the stuff that you guys that were reporting on it. She got all the bits and pieces now in one 2-hour segment, and the bottom line is it's a story that just closed the book on it, and that's not really why I called. That's how I met you.
Do you know who it was? Do you know who did that, or was it Leanne by any chance? Or
a fiery little blonde girl. I mean, she's been at the mic taking on local politicians. She was, I think, in Vegas, residing in Vegas. So it's not.
I think I might know who you mean, but I'm not sure.
Fireball.
But keep going.
Another fireball that ended up running for office down in Florida. She was part of that news team also, trying to expose the truth there. Isn't it weird to use that term, exposing the truth, debunking? But no, the reason I called is 66 years ago, approximately. Sounds like a long time. That's not one of those hidden symbol numbers either. 33 times 2. By the way, tomorrow is 3/11. Look out.
Oh, good. Oh, good point. Yeah.
These things matter. But 66 years ago, my father left with the clothing on his back in a potato truck over the Hungarian border to Austria and I still have the medical bag. He died 10 years ago at the age of 81. I still have the medical bag, and I think we still have his shoes that he, had to leave with. So I sit here today watching this kind of nonsense propaganda and go, how is it trillions and trillions of dollars later, with the top diplomats of the world, we can't resolve this crap? Is that a swear word I can't use? I'm sorry.
No, it's just crap's okay.
So
I think.
What's that one saying, Lee? Like, no matter how much things change, they don't change. Different day, different dollar.
all those little.
Well, I think let me answer some of it. Great call, Pete. Thanks for the call. So let me point out one of the things. I think the CIA's adapted, and that, I think, helps explain the involvement of George Soros in Ukraine back in 89, 90. Because the CIA realized, we know in the 50s they had Operation Mockingbird. And at that point, they were like, well, if we just cozy up to the editors at the New York Times and Washington Post, then they realized that you really, and some of the writers, that's not enough. What you need to do is you need to get at the places that supply the raw material for writers. That's the think tanks, the civil society groups, the people who do white papers, that kind of thing. And so what they realized was, we're going to have to adapt. In the 50s, 60s, 70s, the CIA, with Mykola Lebed, the Ukrainian war criminal, they had the Prologue Company. And they were doing things one way. They were just funding. The CIA literally wrote checks to Prologue. You can see it in their own files on the CIA archive site. They realized there's a better way to do it. Let's make sure a guy like Soros is set up, and if he funds everybody, he'll have a lot of control. And that's exactly the way he's used. So I think, to answer your question, the reason is that the deep state adapted. They did not keep the same tactics. And that's what the thing I talk about in Igor Lopotnik's great film, Revealing Ukraine. I talk about something called Civil Society 2.0. Anybody can look that up. Just go to a search engine. Look up Civil Society 2.0. And that was a way of training activists to use cell phones and Twitter and so on. It was funded by the State Department. Hillary Clinton got it going. Two things came out of Civil Society 2.0. Number one, the Arab Spring. Number two, the Euromaidan. Because they realized, if we can train activists to use the social media, which is what they did at these things called tech camps. Anybody can look up Tech Camp Kiev, you'll find it. They realized, if we change our tactics a little bit. So that's the thing to realize. The deep state does not stay still. It's always looking at new media technology, new ways of communicating, and I think that's what's important. Now, Command Central, who we got next? Okay, final call before we get to John Kiriakou in the next half hour. My old co-host here at the Backstory. John in D.C., not John Kiriakou, but caller John. What's on your mind?
Hey, how's it going, Lee? Thanks so much. Two things real quick. One is I've started to talk about a neutral Ukraine, and I think it's interesting because if you talk to, the other side, and you talk about a neutral Ukraine, oftentimes what you'll get is you'll get them to agree with you right away. Oh, yeah, neutral Ukraine. And you go, well, that's what Putin wants. And it's like, wait, what? And then a conversation can maybe be had. But I had another thought for you, and then I want to let you go. I think you're just going to maybe get a kick out of this. So I'm flirting with the idea of getting an Azov Battalion T-shirt. I'm looking at them here online. You can literally order them. They've got the,
yes,
got these signs. This one says A30B or whatever that whole thing is. And I'm thinking of doing it to troll my neoliberal New York Times indoctrinated family and let them know that I'm standing behind them and killing Eastern Ukrainians and big bad Putin.
There we go. That is high-level trolling to wear one of the Azov Battalion, they call it the Wolf's Angel, that weird N thing, I guess, whatever. But the logo, we saw that on Amazon, that in fact, yes, you can get Azov Battalion shirts and stuff like that. And they wouldn't know what they were looking at, your friends, I'm sure. But if you wore here's an idea for you, not to tell your business, John. But what I would do is I would also get a piece of Velcro and a Ukrainian flag, and I would put that on top of the shirt. And then you can rip off the Ukrainian flag, showing the Wolf's Angel, the Nazi symbol, and go, it's the same thing. Why do you like this symbol? Because I've said before, Ukraine's flag, the blue and yellow, they are very pleasant colors. I like that kind of pastel-y range. So I'm not knocking the colors. But they adapt some of those colors into their Nazi regalia. The Azov Battalion, I've noticed that. They'll combine things like anybody can look up. They've got the Ukrainian flag with a swastika over top of it. Fantastic. Nice job. Some little mashup there. Anyway, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, my old partner, John Kiriakou, will be joining us. And we will express, I'll bet John will express, I don't know what he's going to say, but he was my partner for a long time. So I got to guess. I think he's going to be shocked by the ineptitude that Victoria Nuland showed. Among other things, horror at the bioweapons labs, but the ineptitude of Victoria Nuland. I'm not trying to tell anybody the State Department their business, but what do you think in letting this woman near a microphone? Didn't you learn your lesson? We'll talk to John Kiriakou about that and more right after this on The Backstory.
In traffic? No problem. Stay informed. Stay tuned to Radio Sputnik on 105.5 FM or 1390 AM in the Washington, D.C. area. Need more? Follow us on Facebook or check us out on SputnikNews.com.
They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime.
I like beer. Yeah, we drank beer.
Whoever's in charge, and I want to record it.
Let's talk about that.
Discussing all the controversies and news across the disunited states of America. Tune in to Fault Lines every weekday from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern, only on Radio Sputnik.
In a media landscape filled with so-called journalists acting as stenographers for their billionaire bosses, there is a desperate need for news, analysis, and perspectives that buck the status quo and get to the heart of how domestic and international events impact you and me, as well as showing how we can get involved in the struggle to change that status quo. Check out By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik, Monday through Friday from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, to hear the stories and voices that mainstream media refuses to tell you. And join us as we connect the political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us. That's By Any Means Necessary, Monday through Friday at 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on Radio Sputnik.
Hi, I'm political analyst Garland Nixon.
And I'm political scientist, author, and nationally syndicated columnist Dr. Wilmer Leon.
We're the co-hosts for The Critical Hour, airing Monday through Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time here on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C.
We close out your day with a thorough and hard-hitting analysis of the day's top stories, where we bring in brilliant scholars, authors, and investigative journalists from around the world.
And on Fridays, it's panel time, when we do a roundup of the week's most important issues.
Join us to keep up with the world's top stories.
Enjoy an in-depth analysis.
And have a little fun along the way. Listen to our show,
The Critical Hour, Monday through Fridays on Radio Sputnik.
And we're back, 105.5 FM, AM 1390 in Washington, D.C. Very pleased to be able to talk once again to my former co-host here on The Backstory, now co-host of Political Misfits, which is on 12 to 2 every day here on Radio Sputnik. And you can hear it despite the Washington Post's best efforts, 105.5 FM, AM 1390. The great whistleblower, CIA whistleblower, John Kiriakou. John, how you doing?
Hey, Lee, doing well, thanks. Good to be back with you.
So before we get any further, I'm going to do what I've been doing with everybody, which is to ask the most open-ended question I can. Because, John, you know this. If there are ways to bias something simply by the question you ask.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
So I say we're a free speech zone because we are. So I'm not going to bias in any way. I'm not going to even ask you a question. Do you have anything what are your thoughts on the war between Russia and Ukraine that's going on currently? John Kiriakou.
I try to oppose wars that the United States gets involved in, and for the sake of consistency, I feel like I should be opposed to a war between Russia and Ukraine. I understand why the Russians did what they did. I understand that there are ethnic Russians in Ukraine that want to be a part of Russia or want to be independent republics in Russia. I understand that the Russians feel threatened by NATO encroaching on their borders. I just hope that that Russia's demands, which we know have been consistent, that Donetsk and Luhansk become independent republics, that Crimea be officially recognized as a part of Russia, and that Ukraine not join NATO. You know what? If that's the price of peace, that's sort of de facto the situation anyway. So I think that this war won't drag on too terribly much longer.
Yeah, I think it'll be over within about 2 weeks, militarily.
I think that's probably right. Yeah, militarily, yeah, I think that's probably right.
Yeah, and then we'll start to see, because Zelensky's already seeing that NATO's not going to come to the rescue.
Yeah,
right.
The decision over the planes should have done it for him. If I were Zelensky and the United States said publicly that they will not affect the transfer of MiG fighters to Ukraine, I would be running to the negotiating table.
Well, especially after Blinken had given the green light, and then 2 days later they said, no, ixnay, yellow light.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
And it is embarrassing. And Zelensky came out and said he's kind of given up on NATO. That's what Zelensky said. Now, let me ask you, John.
It's clear that NATO is not coming to Ukraine's rescue. They're just not. You know, the CIA provided some training. The Germans provided Stinger missiles. The Dutch provided anti-tank rockets. That's pretty much all they're going to get. They're not getting anything else from NATO.
Well, so we also have European Union coming out and saying, we've reached the limit of what we can do with sanctions. We can't sanction no more.
Right.
Right? And whatever I was just going to say, the U.S. sanctions, one thing that I think is absolutely inarguable, they haven't worked. The U.S. sanctions have not slowed down the Russian military advance one bit. Right? I mean, whether you think they're right,
that's true,
and justified.
But I don't think that was the goal of the sanctions. I think the goal of the sanctions really is long term. I think that the West knew these sanctions would do nothing to slow the Russian advance, but they thought, you know what? Here's our chance to bring down the Russian government, or at least to bring down Vladimir Putin personally. I think that's the goal. The goal is to make things so bad in Russia for the average Russian, or for the well-to-do Russian, those natural supporters of Vladimir Putin, that the hope is that one of them will take him out, or as a group, as a class, they'll push him out and then start fresh. I think that's what the goal is.
No, that's a good point, but that's not working either, because I think they overestimated how much Russians like Big Macs, because McDonald's leaving and Coke and Pepsi, I'm not the only one who made the joke. They're doing Russia a favor, aren't they?
Seriously, they're doing Russia a favor. You know, and another thing too, if I may, this idea to sanction the oligarchs, the billionaires, this is one of the stupidest ideas that I've heard of in recent times. The idea is that these guys form the core of support around Vladimir Putin. That may or may not be true. Who cares? The truth, though, is that they have so much money in so many different places that all they have to do, you know, if your boat is seized in France or your boat is seized in Italy, then just use the boat that you've got docked in Turkey. if your accounts are frozen in London or frozen in Brussels, then you use the accounts you have in the Cayman Islands or the Isle of Man or Liechtenstein. So this idea that somehow sanctioning billionaires that have literally nothing to do with this invasion of Ukraine is going to bring down Vladimir Putin, I never heard of anything so stupid.
Well, no, let me ask you, we have a couple of clips I want to play as well. But you're, a proud Greek American. Let me ask you about the situation between Greece and Ukraine, because it seems to me, but you know a lot about this from the Greek side as well.
Yes,
it seems to me there's no
front-page news in the Greek papers.
And it seems to me there's no love lost between Ukraine and Greece. Because I saw, for instance, there were a number of Greeks who were killed by Ukrainian soldiers, like at a bar about a month and a half ago. And that made no headlines here, but big headlines in Greece. So what's the situation? Tell us what you know about how's this playing in Greece, John?
Oh, yeah. This is front page news every single day. And it's for a reason that most Americans don't know. In southern Ukraine, especially in and around Crimea, a lot of the cities there have Greek-sounding names, the biggest one being Mariupol, right? In Greek, it would be Mariopoulos or Mariopolis. It means city of Mary. So it turns out there are 15,000 ethnic Greeks that live in Mariupol. The Greek government said on day one after the invasion that any Greek Ukrainian who wants to come to Greece either as a refugee or as an immigrant is permitted to do so. So what they did is they sent buses all the way to Mariupol to evacuate every Greek who wanted to be evacuated. What happened, though, was the Azov battalion and their supporters refused to allow anybody to get on those buses. And so the buses have just been sitting there. And then just to make sure that nobody left the city, they mined the only roads out. And so nobody has been able to leave for Greece. They're being held hostage, essentially.
And what we're hearing in the Western media is that's Russia doing all that kind of stuff. But you're saying 100% this is the Azov battalion who's done this, right?
Absolutely. It's the Azov battalion. And, this is something that Greeks don't understand, is this love of Nazism or neo-Nazism. There's a minuscule party in Greece that's a neo-Nazi party called the Golden Dawn. It won a handful of seats in parliament about 7-8 years ago. And then all of its leaders were prosecuted for hate crimes. They're all in prison. The party no longer exists. Greece was occupied by the Nazis from 1940 to 1945. They killed hundreds of thousands of people. The scars from the Second World War still affect society today. And in the mind of the average Greek, in order to embrace Nazi ideology, you have to be utterly insane. And this is something that they just don't understand about Ukraine.
Well, no, and it seems to me, tell me if I'm reading the Greeks right on this. It seems to me if Vladimir Putin was the one not allowing them on the bus, that Greece would say, screw you, Putin. What are you doing? They would call him out, I think. Am I right?
Yes, indeed.
They would.
They would.
They wouldn't.
They would. Yeah.
So
it's true.
So
Greece is an Orthodox Christian country, and so is Russia, and so is Ukraine. So in the beginning, the Greeks were like, listen, we're all brothers here. We gotta sit at the table and work this out. We're all Orthodox Christians. It's a sin to be fighting each other, especially now that Lent has begun. Let's try to get past this. And, they couldn't. And so because Greece is an EU country and it's a NATO country, it had to side with Ukraine, but they called in the Russian ambassador and they said, look, no hard feelings, but if you need somebody to mediate, count on us. And then they sent these buses up to Crimea and were turned away by the Nazis. So, if the Greeks could go it alone, and they can't because they're a small country, but if they could, it would be with the Russians.
And as I say, if it were the Russians keeping the Greeks from leaving, I just think they'd come out and say, we're not trying to pick a fight, but these are our people.
Yes.
And stop it.
Right? Yes. I think you're exactly right.
And so that's one way to look at it, is to say the Greeks do have a dog in this hunt, but it's in favor of the Greeks.
Right.
Right? In favor of the Greek Ukrainians. So
exactly
now
right.
I want to play, we had a couple of clips, then I got some other stuff to talk to you about on this, but it's great to talk to you again. So let's play the false flag clip, because I want to talk to you about this Nuland thing too. Well, let's play the false flag clip first, Command Central.
Boris Johnson said he's worried that Russia might use chemical weapons.
As we've always said, we will not push them into concessions. Instead, the Kremlin continues to spread outright lies, such as the allegation that the United States and Ukraine are conducting chemical and biological weapons activities in Ukraine, and their baseless claim that bombing a maternity hospital is, quote unquote, fake news. This is from a government that is now using many measures to hide the truth from its own people. The Kremlin viciously targets journalists and floods the internet and airwaves with disinformation, both around the world and at home in Russia. Many people in Russia have no idea what their government is doing right now in Ukraine. They may think they're liberating Ukraine, not destroying it. They don't know the extent to which their fellow countrymen, their husbands, their sons, their brothers are coming home in body bags, if the Russian government bothers to bring them home at all.
Now, so there's Ned Price. Now, in the light of what we heard the other day, was Victoria Nuland talking about bio-research material. The first statement he's saying, they're still sticking to this line. It's almost like Victoria Nuland didn't exist. But you heard what she said, John.
Oh, yeah. You know, Lee, I think that Nuland never expected a question like that from Marco Rubio. When Marco Rubio asked her about the labs, I think it just utterly threw her. You know, there's so much information out there. Can you imagine being a Senate staffer, for example, and you're trying to prep your member for every issue under the sun, and you can't. You can't, just because there's too much going on. The situation changes by the hour. And so you prep your member for the stuff that's interesting to you, or the stuff that's interesting to him or to her if you work for a female senator. And Victoria Nuland, on the other side, is supposed to be ready for literally any question. Now, what she should have done is to say, Senator, I can't answer that question in an open venue. I'll put it in writing and send it to you in classified channels. That's what she should have said. But it was like he threw a grenade at her, and she didn't know what to do. So she dove on it, and she made a fool of herself.
And what I've said is, and I really think this is the case, that the implications of what she did were too close to it right now. It's hard to see.
Yeah.
But that clip of her saying it, 10 years from now, that will be in documentaries. 10 years from now, 20 years from now.
I agree.
And
yeah,
the implications of it are so great. It's the U.S. admitting, and so even Ned Price we heard there, he's not realized you can't say what he's saying anymore. But it's very clear. Do you agree?
Right. Yeah, I agree completely. You know, this is another thing, too, this propaganda war. I think that there are so many people in the administration, the Biden administration, who are true believers. And so they think that it should be easy to convince everybody that the Biden administration is on the right side of this issue, right? It's not even really propaganda so much as it's just the truth. We have to get the truth out there. The Russians are bad guys. The Russians are imperialists. The Russians need to go back home. All their young men are going to go home in body bags. And it throws them when people raise the notion that there are two sides to every story. And they don't know how to respond.
Yeah, no, and I think there's foreign policy implications of it, but one of them is, I was on Alex Jones' show today, and he agreed that in terms of the U.S. information war, what Victoria Nuland did came at the end of 3 or 4 days of the United States through USA Today, through Business Insider, all of these outlets saying there's no bioweapons in Ukraine. That's a Russian lie, right?
Right.
They were beating that drum as hard as Mark Frost on a bender. I'm just saying, boom. They were really beating on that drum, saying this is a Russian lie. And for Nuland to come out and say, oh, well, actually we do, with such ineptitude, I'm shocked that anyone lets Victoria Nuland anywhere near a microphone. Do you agree with me on that, John?
I do agree. And, you know, Lee, we're also signatories to a multitude of international treaties and agreements that ban this kind of research, right? Well, I mean, we make such a big deal about how we don't have a BW program. What we have is research that's being done on Plum Island or at Fort Detrick, but it's not a program because programs are illegal. Well, now Victoria Nuland just confirmed that there is a program. We just don't have it here in the United States. We moved it to Ukraine and Georgia and Turkey, and there are these little labs all over the place. One of the things that I learned when I was at the CIA was about BW. We used to talk about BW all the time as it related to Iraq. And the scientists used to say, you know, it's impossible to say that, well, there's a BW facility and it's at such and such a location, because all you need essentially is a kitchen sink and a power outlet that you can plug your equipment into. And so, you know, where we might not have these things here in the United States, they're everywhere. Earlier today on my show, my co-host Michelle Whitty was talking about how there are a bunch of them in Kazakhstan, and they're supposed to be cooperating with U.S. scientists. So these things, apparently there are hundreds of them, and they're all over the world. So when Victoria Nuland said that they... Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, the other problem I think they've got here is that if they try to say, well, it's not weapons. Oh, I see. So you're researching things like COVID-19? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
This coming after the pandemic raises questions. Right. Why is the U.S. lying about it so actively? What are they hiding? You see what I'm saying? And I think it's got to. We got one more clip I want to play here, John. Let's play the longer clip we got here. Command Central, go ahead.
Boris Johnson said he's worried that Russia might use chemical weapons. Does the United States share that concern?
Well, we have spoken to this concern in recent hours, and those concerns are predicated on a couple elements. First, we know the history here. We know the track record of the Kremlin. This is a government that has used banned chemical weapons on its own people in the past. They have done so on Russian territory. They've done so on British soil. They have supported the brutal Assad regime, which itself has used banned chemical weapons on its people. So we know what this government will resort to, can resort to, has resorted to in the past. But the other element that gives us a good deal of concern is what we know about the Kremlin's tactics, especially its disinformation tactics. In recent weeks, we have seen, once again, indications of what a psychologist might call projection of the Russian government accusing others, in this case, whether it's Ukraine, the United States, others of baselessly planning to do what it itself may be planning to do.
Okay, but let me interrupt you there. Have you guys seen any intelligence, any indication, anything from the ground, from their military deployments to suggest that this fear is warranted?
Well, we do have this concern, and we have this concern for at least a couple reasons, and I've spoken to two of them. Moscow's track record in this regard, and also the increasingly concerning rhetoric that may be construed as, once again, Moscow projecting onto others what it has intended to do all along.
So it's interesting, John. I'm going to read between the lines there. He's talking about the Sergei Skripal case. And here's the thing, Ned. If you want to bring up a Skripal case, go for it. Because here's a question for you. Where's Sergei Skripal? You don't know. He's being held prisoner. He and his daughter, Yulia, are effectively being held prisoner by Great Britain. And that's been established. Where are they? Why aren't we hearing from them? So if you want to bring up the Skripal case, go for it, Ned Price. You see what I'm getting at, Sean?
Yeah, you know, the Washington Post criticized me by name recently because when I was talking about the Skripal case on my show, I said that this was yet another instance where the American government said, here's our conclusion. We're not going to tell you the evidence. You have to take our word for it. And when I was trained at the CIA in analysis, we were trained that we could not reach a conclusion without evidence. So if you have evidence, lay it out so we can see it. Otherwise, you can't make these accusations.
Now, John, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a general CIA question. That just because you obviously you know your stuff on this, and it's something I've been researching a little bit. Can you explain? This is coming out of nowhere, but it'll come back around eventually, I think, and people will start to look at this in understanding why the U.S. is doing it. Can you explain what they call the Team B concept at the CIA? How is that defined? What's the Team B concept?
Honest to God, Lee, I've never heard of it before.
Oh, really?
Never
I thought it was
heard
the CIA. Okay, so what the Team B concept was broadly, just so you know why I'm bringing it up, is it's some of the basis for the neocons, the way they're doing things. It was people at the CIA, and they formed an alternate hypothesis. That's why I use the term Team B. But their alternate hypothesis.
I'm sorry, Team B. I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. I thought you said TEENB.
No, team.
Oh, got it. Yeah, Team B. Team B came out of something called the Tiger Teams. It was supposed to be a group of analysts who, and I hate this phrase, were charged with thinking outside the box, which always drove me crazy. And they would come up with sometimes the most implausible scenarios and then recommend policy based on these implausible scenarios. And you're right, the neocons loved it because the scenarios always ended with some sort of U.S. intervention. You know, for example, what happens if the Iranians attack Bahrain? Well, I remember this one specifically. The Iranians aren't going to attack Bahrain because Bahrain is the headquarters of the Fifth Fleet, right? So it would be war with the United States instantaneously. But then you've got to put a team of 8 people together to do this analysis, this blow by blow. What would happen if the Iranians attacked Bahrain? And you would do this with these teams all around the world. But they wouldn't do the normal analysis that you would expect. They would do analysis based on these radically implausible scenarios.
Yeah, and it seems to me like some of this thinking has trickled down to what we're seeing in Ukraine. One final question. You've been around D.C. a long time. Am I being over-hypey here? Is it hyperbole to say that what we saw where Saudi Arabia and the UAE refused to take Biden's phone call is historic? I don't think I've ever seen or even heard of a U.S. president getting turned down by a close ally like Saudi Arabia. Am I right, or is it hype to say that was historic, a huge deal?
Oh, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. That was historic. It was shocking to many that the Saudis and the Emiratis wouldn't take the call. And the rumor that I heard from a friend of mine at the Pentagon yesterday was that they finally did take the call, and they did agree to an eventual visit by Biden, but only in exchange for enhanced U.S. support in Yemen. And I'm not sure exactly what that means. If it means more drones or more rockets or F-35s, I think to be determined. But there was a quid pro quo there.
The music's playing, and you know I got to get out when the music's playing. John Kiriakou, great to talk to you, brother. John is on noon to 2, Political Misfits with Michelle Whitty. That's where you can check out John. And thanks to Igor Lopotnik, and thanks to the amazing callers, except for that one jerk. All the amazing callers today be like you. We'll be back tomorrow on the best damn talk show in the world. This is The Backstory.